Warning, if you are mentally fragile, depressed, suicidal, or struggling with mental illness, do not listen to this episode. This episode may give you an existential crisis, depression, or suicidal thoughts. This episode may rob your life of meaning and purpose, cause mental instability, or lead to depersonalization. If you are into mainstream spirituality, this episode may piss you off. Welcome to the ultimate guide to solipsism. In this episode, you're going to get a definitive answer, a very clear-cut answer to the question of, is solipsism true? I'm not just merely interested here in discussing solipsism as a philosophical position that could or could not be true and leaving it up in the air. I'm going to give you a definitive answer, and I'm going to give you a method, a definitive method, a very scientific method for validating this answer for yourself so that you don't just believe me or take me on my word. And we're going to go through an exhaustive list of frequently asked questions, an FAQ, if you will, of just the common questions people have around this solipsism question. There are many, many different questions that people have. I get asked all the time on the forum and in the comments section, various kinds of questions. And so we're going to tackle all of these today. In fact, that's going to be the bulk of what this episode is just answers to common questions about solipsism and so forth. Before we get into that, though, let's sort of set the ground for the definition of what solipsism is. And for this, it's good to go to Wikipedia and just take a look at how it's defined. Because a lot of times people have sort of just an idea of solipsism, but they don't really think about what solipsism means. And then when they get the answer, they don't understand what the answer means. So here's what Wikipedia says solipsism is. Quote, solipsism, from the Latin solus, meaning alone, and ipsi, meaning self, is the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside of one's own mind is unsure. The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. Metaphysical solipsism is a variety of solipsism, so it's a deeper version of solipsism, based on a philosophy of subjective idealism. Metaphysical solipsists maintain that the self is the only existing reality and that all other realities, including the external world and other persons, are representations of that self and have no independent existence. Furthermore, it says, the denial of material existence in itself does not constitute solipsism. A feature of the metaphysical solipsistic worldview is the denial of the existence of other minds. Since personal experiences are private and often considered ineffable, another being's experience can be known only by analogy. Some people hold that while it cannot be proven that anything independent of one's mind exists, the point that solipsism makes is irrelevant. This is because, whether the world as we perceive it exists independently or not, we cannot escape this perception, except via death. Hence, it is best to act assuming the world is independent of our minds. End quote. From the Wikipedia page on solipsism. So, before I give you the answer, first, what needs to be noticed about this issue is that mankind gives a very negative connotation to the term and the concept of solipsism. Have you noticed this? Notice this and start to wonder why. And if you are like the majority of mankind, you give a negative connotation to solipsism. Notice that you're biased against solipsism. My question to you is, why? Contemplate that. Why do you assume it's bad? Why do you assume it's crazy? Why do you assume it's impossible? Why do you assume it's unscientific? And what I want you to notice, if you're very careful with introspecting, as we've talked about in my episode called Developing Introspection, if you become good at introspection, what you'll notice actually, if you examine the contents of your own mind on this topic, is that, in fact, having a bias against solipsism or giving solipsism as a worldview a negative meaning is, in fact, unscientific and irrational. There's nothing scientific about not liking solipsism. If solipsism is true, then that is what's true, regardless of whether mankind likes it or not, whether you like it or not, whether your mom likes it or not, whether some scientist likes it or not. It's irrelevant. And likewise, if solipsism turns out to be true, it's irrelevant that you think it's not logical or that it's improbable or that it's crazy. This is all irrelevant. If we're doing a real scientific investigation into the nature of reality, then we should be open to all possible worldviews, explore everything, get to the rock bottom of what reality is, and whatever that turns out to be, whatever the truth turns out to be, then our job is to just accept that, and that is what is true. You see? But the way that most people throw out that word solipsism, they use it in an accusatory manner, like, oh, well, that is very solipsistic. And so, that doesn't mean it's not true. What does that have to do with anything? You see, we're interested in truth. We don't care what your feelings about it are. And a lot of times people accuse me and my teachings of being very solipsistic in this sort of negative fashion, as though this is some sort of insult to me to call my teaching solipsistic. So anyways, be very honest with yourself about that. Notice if you have this sort of negative predisposition against solipsism, and then ask yourself, is that in line with the spirit of seeking truth? Or is just that some sort of personal bias that you have? See? Because if you were truly interested in the truth, it wouldn't matter to you that something is solipsistic as long as it's true. And if you, in fact, loved the truth, and then you discovered that solipsism was true, you would then fall in love with solipsism, if it's true. So the question is solipsism true? And how could you possibly ever know? There's a very big mistake that people make, which is that they assume that it's impossible to know. But furthermore, they don't just assume that it's impossible to know, they take it as an absolute fact that it's impossible to know. And that's a very dangerous position to take. The mind takes that position without realizing that it's actually taking that as an absolute position. And what's worse is that a lot of scientifically minded people, atheistically minded people, and rationally minded people will take an absolute position on this point, that it's impossible to know whether solipsism is true or not. Or even worse than that, they say it isn't. Solipsism isn't true. Really, the way we want to approach this question is that what are we really asking when we're asking, is solipsism true? What we're really asking is, we're asking about the nature of other. There is self and there is other. Other as being anything that's not the self. So if whatever you take yourself to be, if you take yourself to be this human, then other is defined relative to that to mean everything other to you. It's sort of the inverse of your self-definition. And so the question really becomes, what is other? Well, to answer that question, you also have to know what is self, because self and other are interdefined as inverses of each other, like convex and concave. To know what concave is, you have to know what convex is, and vice versa. It's a duality. So in spiritual work, usually we frame the question as, what is the self? What am I? Who am I? And we do self-inquiry to get to the bottom of what the self is. That's one direction to go. That's the most common direction that people go in spiritual work as they're trying to awaken. But then there's a sort of a other direction, the inverse direction, which most people ignore. They don't think about very deeply. And that direction is, what is other? Have you contemplated that? How seriously have you contemplated that? Or do you just take for granted this notion of other, what other is? And see, if you haven't seriously gotten to the bottom, to the rock bottom of what other is, if you don't know the truth of what other is, then how can you even be sure that other is real or other exists? See, you have to be open to the possibility that you don't know what other is. And if you don't know what other is, your lack of knowing about it can be so profound that it might be the case that other doesn't even exist. What if, because other and self are so interdefined, that given how you've defined yourself leads to a co-arising definition of other, and that if you expand or change your sense of self and your identity, then that will also change your understanding of other. And furthermore, open your mind to the possibility that if you expand your sense of identity or self to become infinite or absolutely total and all-inclusive, then that will literally leave no more room for other, and other may cease to exist as it collapses into yourself. And then all you'll be left with is yourself. But this will be a radically different notion of self than you and most of your compatriots have, because this would be a sense of self that is so large that it includes everything that you previously considered to be other. Now, the problem here is that even though I say this, and you might be somewhat open to the things I'm saying here, to these possibilities, the problem is that you're not grasping the depth of these possibilities and their consequences, very radical consequences, because your mind will tend to take this as just a word game. It's like, well, Leo, okay, yeah, I can play with my definitions of self and other, but these are just like conceptual things, right? Like, what difference does it make? It doesn't change what reality is, right? Well, if it was just a word game, I wouldn't be spending all this time talking about it. So clearly, we're doing this work because it's not just a word game. Something deeper is being said. So anyways, that's just to open your mind. I'm not gonna withhold from you anymore. So is solipsism true? The answer is yes. But I have some explaining to do about what that actually means. And in fact, it means something more radical than whatever you think it means. So most people object to solipsism and they say it's not true because if it was true, they think it's too crazy, too wacky, too radical. But the truth is that you can become directly conscious of what other,
give me 30 days and I'll make you,
of what other is, and also of what self is. And then when you finally get to the rock bottom of what other is, you're going to discover that other is your own self, your own mind. And the consequences of this are so radical that they will shake you to your core. And they will lead to a radical recontextualization of all of reality and all of experience for you. And this is a very serious thing. It's no mere wordplay. And so my job is to help to guide you towards that. Now, this is tricky and difficult and even dangerous to do because most people don't appreciate just how much emotional investment they have in the concept of other being real. Your entire life hinges on this. Your entire sense-making apparatus, how you make sense of reality, hinges on a sense of other. Even all of your scientific theories and scientific explorations, all of your logic and all your rationality, it all hinges on a notion of other, which is taken for granted as being real. This sense of other sits at the very core of your psyche, not just psychologically, but deeper than that, existentially. And it's deeply interwoven with your sense of self and your identity, such that to take away from you, to rob you of a notion of other, will lead to a collapse of your entire mind and your sense of reality, because your sense of reality is tied in with your sense of self and your sense of other. But because we just assume that self and other and reality just are the way we think they are, we take all of that for granted, the possibility isn't even open in our minds that such a radical breaking down of these boundaries can happen, and it's impossible for us to even imagine what the consequences of that would be for our life. So I've actually held back for about a year now shooting this episode.
No self, no problem. Old tales forgotten. All concepts dropping. Nothing is solid. Call it a day, let it all fall away. Dissolving all displays, pure awareness remains. No self, no problem. Old tales forgotten. All concepts dropping. Nothing is solid. Call it a day, let it all fall away. Dissolving all displays, pure awareness remains. When self is empty, all attacks will miss you. When invisible, what can be the issue? It's just a mirror, it'll disappear. Not really here or anywhere. Nothing to entertain, I'm no longer in the game. I sat in the flames till we became the same. Burn to ashes, I shade in the blackness, namaste. Skate on the cliche and passe, past days fade. Red and black rain, pop my leg across. Water falling, cascade, drip falling off. Through love I become one with my lover. There is no self, there are no others. Even though I'm present, I also dipped out the exit and left it all behind. Forget it, how can I be that? How can I be this when the concept of I don't even exist? Plot twist, I vanish from the optics. Hit the light switch, head buried in the sand, ostrich. Can't be found like the Loch Ness. Disappearance into pure awareness. What's left is just a clearness, sorta like the air is. Without the concept of me, consciousness is free on some funny shit. My true self is nothingness. Lotus out the muddiness. Silence is the loveliness, resonance. I vacated the premises. What you believe is not what's up. You is just a thought construct. I know it looked like we're here, but we really ain't. Through all these colors, the canvas really blank. Meditating with 0 point energy until I zeroed out and destroyed my identity. Yeah. No self, no problem. Old tales forgotten. All concepts dropping. Nothing is solid. Call it a day, let it all fall away. Dissolving all displays, pure awareness remains. No self, no problem. Old tales forgotten. All concepts dropping. Nothing is solid. Call it a day, let it all fall away. Dissolving all displays, pure awareness remains. Nothing to control, leave your mind alone. Ain't nowhere to go, leave your mind alone. Relax and take it slow, leave your mind alone. Don't condemn and don't condone, leave your mind alone. Nothing to control, leave your mind alone. Ain't nowhere to go, leave your mind alone. Relax and take it slow, leave your mind alone. Don't condemn and don't condone, leave your mind alone. The mind is fine, just leave it. Blind lead the blind but don't see it. Nothing to accomplish, no achievements. Do the knowledge, don't believe it. Forward, onward, no retreating. There's more to life than what we thinking. Yours to define, you give it meaning. The borders and divides, divide and deleted. No finalized completion. Am I awake or do I dream? Bluest sky, all empty, divine esteem, the mind pristine. No need to intervene, no need to interfere. Integrated and clear ever since I entered here. The end is near, behead the fear. It's all been engineered by Exhibit, I'm just a mere. Opposite pairs and dualities are not the true bearers of reality. It's an act of balancing. I put the fat nug in the chalice thing and cut through all the fallacies. My ordinary vision looked like LSD. Fuck with me. No need to extrapolate, no need to elaborate, no need to exasperate. Let it come and pass away. Leave that shit, don't believe that shit. The past patterns in old sequences. Nothing lacking, no adding or subtracting. Emptiness, wisdom, compassion, in action. No thought on the future or past shit. I bury the hatchet in the casket. Nothing to control, leave your mind alone. Ain't nowhere to go, leave your mind alone. Relax and take it slow, leave your mind alone. Don't condemn and don't condone, leave your mind alone. Nothing to control, leave your mind alone. Ain't nowhere to go, leave your mind alone. Relax and take it slow, leave your mind alone. Don't condemn and don't condone, leave your mind alone.
Pass it up because I'm about to assist a generation that doesn't know what the alchemist is, or even for the agreements that came from Toltec teachings. They treating spiritual work like it's the terms and conditions. They love to smile at the camera, but they frown at the system. They say they down for the ride, but then give up on the mission. I think it's time that you listen to something different than fear. I hope you're practicing, you're preaching, all cohesive, and you're never falling victim at the foot of what they feeding. It's a mousetrap. They say a lot of words about the truth, but how's that? Silence is the answer, and you can't talk about that. Nah. Okay, a little too deep. Let me get back on the surface where the people can see. All these senses making sense and everything is in reach. Well, they ain't gotta be too sure, cause life is a beach. I'd like to believe that everything I say is received, downloaded and perceived as something they need, but that's high hopes. It'd be rare if they felt the message like blind folks, but they deaf, put me on mute like iPhones. Now feel me vibrating at a frequency that leaves the people's pupils dilating. I'm waiting for sick people to be more patient and realize that meditation will heal their complications. I know easier said than done. A busy society saying stillness will make you dumb. If you ain't moving fast enough, then you gon' miss half the fun. The turtle has half the funds. The rabbit can't feel himself. The person can't heal himself. Now give him a gold medal. Sell him a celebration and tell him he's so special. Fake friends asking for a favor with no hello. All these temporary highs really just falsetto. All pillow. Or you still doubting the kid? Or you think I'ma pass it up because I'm about to assist a generation that doesn't know what the alchemist is, or even for the agreements that came from Toltec teachings. They treating spiritual work like it's the terms and conditions. They love to smile at the camera, but they frown at the system. They say they down for the ride, but then give up on the mission. I think it's time that you listen to something different than fear. I hope you're practicing, you're preaching, all cohesive, and you're never falling victim at the foot of what they feeding. It's a mousetrap. They say a lot of words about the truth, but how's that? Silence is the answer, and you can't talk about that.
What is reality? Obviously, no one can say because it isn't words. It isn't material, that's just an idea. It isn't spiritual, that's also an idea.